Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Beneath the Surface. Today we'll be discussing, is ISIS a terrorist group or rebels? Joining us on the show is Reverend Nadeem Nassar, the Director of Awareness Foundation. Thank you very much for being with us on the show. Let's start off with straight away, who is ISIS?
ISIS is the creation of the West. I think this is a bold statement from me. But if you look at the history of ISIS, suddenly in 18 months, we have one of the strongest, if not the strongest, and the richest armed organization in the whole world. They pushed Al-Qaeda to the shadow, actually, and they took over. And suddenly they had the power to occupy a lot of space in Syria. For the first time since the conflict in Syria started, they could take control over an entire state in Syria. Syria is divided into 14 states, and they controlled the whole of Raqqa state, plus to control the second largest city in Iraq, and to take this city with zero resistance is unbelievable, and it is not normal.
You mentioned that ISIS has taken over places in Syria. Why is it when ISIS was in Syria, none of the world said anything about it, and everyone was actually encouraging ISIS?
Because it was looked at with Jabhat al-Nusra and other Islamic fanatical groups. They were looked at as supporters to the oppositions and against the regime, against the president, Bashar al-Assad.
But many of the groups, such as Jabhat al-Nusra and Al-Qaeda at the time, were saying that ISIS isn't part of us and ISIS is an extreme group. However, the West continued to fund them. Why do you think that is?
Because exactly the political agenda suited them. As long as any group fights the regime, for the West it is okay. And even for the oppositions, unfortunately. They said, the oppositions said from the beginning, any weapon against the regime or against the president is a friendly weapon, friends. Such a generalization is very dangerous, because those groups who are fighting the regime, yes, but they turned against the oppositions, and now Jabhat al-Nusra is fighting ISIS, and what so-called Free Syrian Army is fighting both. So who is against who now? And where is the common goal to fight the regime? So the West turned a blind eye because Jabhat al-Nusra and ISIS and such groups fulfilled the agenda of the West. But now it is different, because those groups are turning against the West. And don't forget a very important element, which is ISIS is playing the role of the dump of all the fanatics, Muslim fanatics around the world, especially from the West. Now, thousands of jihadis are going from all over the world, especially the West, to join ISIS. And this is to the delight of the West. Well, go. Although they don't announce it, but fine, go. Because they think if all those fanatics leave the West and go to fight with ISIS, they will be killed there. And they don't know when they come back to the West, the damage and the trouble they are bringing with them. That is still another subject that the West has to deal with.
But wasn't there other ways that they can actually remove the regime in Syria? A more democratic type of approach?
What does democracy mean, Naqa?
That's a very good question.
It's a very good question. They wanted a Western concept of democracy. as if democracy is like a package. I send it to you by post, and you open it and you assemble it like a wardrobe or like a table. You assemble it and you start using it. Democracy cannot be imported or exported. Democracy has to emerge from the local culture, from the local context. Because of that, you can't impose democracy like this on other countries. If you ask the British politicians, how long has it taken Britain to emerge to the system we know today, the democratic system we know today? It took centuries, and it is different than the model in America. The democracy in America takes completely a different form and different shape. And if you go to Germany, democracy has also a different shape, a third shape. In France, is a fourth shape. So how on earth do you expect in a couple of years you impose on Iraq or on Syria or on Egypt or Libya a concept that took the West centuries to crystallize and develop and evolve? It's impossible. Because of that, we are sinking in bloodshed.
Speaking of bloodshed, in Iraq, when ISIS went to Iraq, that's when, America and other Western countries stood up and said, oh, we have to fight ISIS. Why do you think that is?
Because in Iraq, when ISIS started fighting, it fought against the agenda of the West. And they did not expect that ISIS would spread that quickly with such power and taking Western hostages. Don't forget that when you take a Western hostage and kill the hostage, you are sending enormous trouble to the West. Why? Because of the votes. When the American two journalists were beheaded in Iraq, America could not stay silent about what ISIS is doing in Iraq. Because for America, for the president, this is a matter of urgency on the national level, American level. So otherwise he would lose the votes. So he had to move, he had to act. But as long as Christians were killed, Shia were killed, Yazidis were killed, all kinds of minorities were displaced and tortured and beheaded, the West didn't care.
So it was only when people from their own groups,
Yes.
own countries were affected, that's when they actually took action.
Yes, because the agenda, the political agenda, plays the primary role in these things.
But don't you think they also have an agenda in Iraq? They're just finding another excuse to go into Iraq.
Yes, there is, of course, there is another thinking that we have even a deeper control in Iraq. Plus, there is a very dangerous agenda, which is the sectarian agenda. They want to empty the Middle East from Christianity and other minorities. And the best way is to send such a horrible, bloodthirsty organization to do what they want to do.
But why do they want to remove the minorities?
Because minorities are, in general, headache to control an area. Because they can resist the control. If you have a country with monocolor, just one group with one belief, you can manipulate that much easier than when you have different religions and different denominations and different belief systems. It's very difficult to manipulate all that. So in Sykes-Picot, agreement in 1916, they divided the area into the states we know: Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, Palestine. All those borders were created in Sykes-Picot Agreement. Now, they want even to divide further the Middle East, but according to sectarian agenda. Now we have, let's create a Shia state. Let's create a safe haven for Christians. And the excuse behind it, we cannot force the Iraqis to live with each other together. So it seems the Iraqis, the Muslim Iraqis, do not want the Christians among them. We can't impose that on them. An MP told me, he said, "Father, we can't impose on the Iraqis to live together." I said, "Yes, you can't, but you cannot. But also, you can not influence radical groups to create troubles there for the minorities."
But for many years, the Christians and the Muslims
Exactly.
in Iraq have been living together.
Exactly.
And Mosul is a big example.
Yes.
Because it's got the Sunnis, it's got the Shia, it's got the Yazidis, it's got the Christians, it's even got a very small minority of
Yes.
Jews.
Jews,
over
Shabak.
there. So why is it that they want to create this big division? I understand in 2003 when America invaded Iraq, they created the whole Sunni-Shia conflict, which sadly in Iraq it actually worked. But now they're even creating it bigger, as you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
But why do they want to do that when people are actually living together?
Because they don't want them to live together in peace. Because once they are enriched by each other, you know, diversity is always enriching element that we ignore. And the politicians manipulate very well. Unfortunately, we are uneducated in the Middle East. How rich and how wonderful our societies are through this mosaic of diversity and what is minority in one country is a majority in another country. Well, the Shia in Syria are minority. In Iraq, they are majority. The Sunni in Iraq are minority. In Syria are majority. This is the richness of the Middle East. And we stupid people cannot see that what we are doing, we are destroying the very nature of the most fantastic context we have, which is unique in the whole world. No country, no region in the whole world has so many diverse communities like the Middle East. Now suddenly, we are convinced that we shouldn't live together. And I have to highlight here, I heard patriarchs and bishops, Christian patriarchs and bishops, talking about their dismay and desperation that the trust between communities is broken. And many Christians believe that their neighbors, their Muslim neighbors, betrayed them. This is horrible. And we don't want that. We want to live together. We don't want to leave the Middle East. And I'm sure most of the Muslims in the Middle East do not want us to leave. But some people are taken by this euphoria of, oh, well, yes, why not? We can be, the whole Mosul could be only Muslim, which is, why not? It looks as if it's a triumphalistic. So it's a victory for us. Actually, it's not a victory. It is a defeat for all of us. What victory is it if you prove to me that you cannot live with somebody who is different than you? Is this your victory?
No, it isn't at all. You mentioned that a lot of Christians are believing that they are not wanted in Iraq. However, many Christians and other minorities have gone to Najaf and have gone to Karbala, and they are welcomed by the Sunni and the Shia groups there, and they're actually putting them in their homes and in the mosques there, and they're all supporting one another. Why is this idea that they're not wanted still there?
The idea that they are not wanted came from the experience in Mosul and in Nineveh. And those who believed that, they already left. They have already left. Hundreds of thousands of Christians were displaced and immigrated. And I doubt that many of them would go back to Iraq or to Syria. What the damage happened is tragic, absolutely tragic. And we are not supporting any kind of Christian immigration from the Middle East. I know some countries are giving visas, some Western countries, to Christians to leave. But, it is easy to speak in the comfort of a Western city like London. And I understand the suffering those people had. And I understand that it's very difficult to say to a family, stay. And you think, but if they stayed, they could be killed any time.
That is true, but instead of them, like many Syrians who left Syria, they went to Arab countries like Lebanon and like Jordan. Shouldn't the Iraqi people also do that, go to Arab countries instead of the West?
Do you think they are most of the times welcome there? The Syrians are having hell of a time in Lebanon and in Jordan. Lebanon, I understand the pressure on Lebanon has mounted and stretched the resources of the country beyond belief. Lebanon is a very small country and almost doubled its population from the Syrian refugees. They couldn't cope. They can't cope with all these changes, sudden changes to the demographic impact in the country. I do understand the pressure, and I do understand the problems are not easy problems they are having. But a lot of times, Syrians are not welcomed in Lebanon or in Jordan. Go to the camp, the Za'atari camp in Jordan. It is a disaster. It's a catastrophe. It's a human tragedy.
The West, you were mentioning, has an agenda. Didn't they actually think of this element as well, that when the opposition of the regime is going to be, attacking a lot of the cities, didn't they think, where are the people going to be going? Or did they just expect them to go to the West?
When the West was involved in the problem in Syria, and the opposition attacked those cities, they wanted to create refugees because they wanted to say to the world, look what the regime is doing. They are causing thousands of people to leave their homes. So both sides have been playing the card of the refugees and manipulating the suffering and the pain of the people to their own gain, political gain. So they wanted to create a refugee situation in order to say to the world, look what is happening. But the stupid and the most idiotic thinking, it was when the oppositions believed that with such very poor preparation and equipment and training could fight one of the mightiest armies in the Middle East. And they really believed that with such gang style war, guerrilla style, that they can take over the country. It was the most idiotic idea, because when the movement started in Syria, it was started not to topple the regime. It started to push the regime to reform the institutions in Syria, the health institution, the education institution, the corruption, to stop the corruption, to stop the decaying of the society. But then they felt, no, actually, we can't topple the regime by force. What are you doing?
But as the opposition wanted to take power, how did they find that destructing the country itself and bombing all the homes and all the historical elements in Syria was going to help them?
It would never have helped. Both the regime and the oppositions bombed each other and thought that they could end the conflict by military victory. And actually, I was more clear than ever, even at the beginning of the conflict, that military victory would have been absolutely impossible. And I said that in many, many, many interviews. And I said the only way to create a new democratic Syria is by dialogue, by sitting around the table and finding a way forward, away from violence and bloodshed.
But do you think that can actually take place in Syria?
No.
Why?
Because the Syria, where do you go? Either you go to an area controlled by the regime or an area controlled by the oppositions. And both are not safe to go there if you are on the other side. So what I always suggested is go to a neutral place and sit and talk. Unfortunately, Geneva too was a failure. I didn't expect any success, but it was a failure because both of them, they played high profiles and they wanted to teach the world some rhetoric, both prepared speeches, and actually the country was slaughtered by both. The situation did not need rhetoric and did not need to score points on each other. The country needed the two parties, the two sides of the conflict, to come in humility and recognition of mistakes that destroyed the country and sit and talk and find ways forward. Instead of that, they both came to Geneva riding their high horses and delivering some victorious, some impressive speeches, where both were stupid and ignorant.
They did an election this year for Syria, and Bashar still won the elections.
Of course he would win. I mean, what election do you conduct in a divided country sinking in blood, and country is bleeding? What kind of election is that?
But why didn't the opposition step down then?
Step down from where?
From the
what?
conflict, like stop the conflict or just like minimize it slightly. As Bashar was elected, even though some people do say it wasn't a fully fair election.
Bashar would have won anyway. Because we are not ready, Naqa, we are not ready as a country to deliver an honest and transparent election. First of all, drop the weapons, find a way forward, and then we can talk about election. You cannot speak in an election in a country that divided by on a sectarian agenda, and people are killing each other and slaughtering each other with some foreigners groups in your country, biting every part of the country with bombings and shelling and kidnapping. What kind of election? Election needs a peaceful situation that people can go to the boxes and participate in a national celebration of peace, but not under siege and hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people left the country and in camps. What are we talking about here? What election is that?
How long do you think this conflict is going to be? Because it's been going on for very long now.
Yes, it will go on until our politicians have the reasoning and finally wake up to the fact that they should have recognized 3 years ago that through military options, through bloodshed, through displaying their muscles, they will not achieve anything but more destruction. And they have to realize that the only way out is for both sides to sit around the table and find a way out. Outside the cameras and outside the media, because the media is adding to the problem, not solving the problem. And they should understand that media should not be present in the conference, but only themselves, because otherwise they will retreat into this self-glorification mode. I am great and we are doing and rhetorics and big speeches, which is all hot air balloons. But actually, we need to have a quiet in the shadow, behind closed doors, talks and negotiations, how to get out of this bloodshed and eradicate those radical groups and finish the bloodshed, allow our people to come back to the country and find a way for both parties to create a system, a political system that is unique for Syria. We do not have to copy anybody. We do not have to take any pre-made system and apply it. Why can't we create our system that is good for our own country?
As ISIS is the common enemy, especially in Syria, and you've got Jabhat al-Nusra and the Free Syrian Army also fighting ISIS, of course, with the regime itself. Why can't these main three groups unite and fight ISIS?
ISIS is a new factor in the scene. ISIS was not there from the start of the conflict. Now everything is directed against ISIS. But even if they kick ISIS out and finish the ISIS problem, they will turn to each other and start fighting each other. Before fighting ISIS, are they ready to talk about having a common system that can bring them together?
Can the people encourage this though?
We are trying to say to the people, look, a common enemy brought you together to defeat it. Why can't a common purpose, a good purpose, not a common enemy, a common agenda, bring you together to end the conflict and sit together and find a way out of this dilemma and vicious circle? Why should a common enemy bring you together, but not the destiny of the country? The country is much more important for the sake of the people of Syria to come together and sit and talk, rather than coming together to fight a common enemy. After you finish the common enemy, you will turn to each other and say, well, but you are my enemy, and I have to finish you. So what have we achieved? We ended a problem and started another problem.
You mentioned about the common enemies. Iraq also and Syria, of course, have ISIS, and the majority, you've got the West, you've got Iraq, you've got Syria, you've got the Gulf, you've got Iran, and you've got Lebanon, all against ISIS. However, each and every country is taking its own steps and its own agenda, and they're not actually coming together. Many people say that sometimes ISIS has actually brought something kind of good, in the sense that the society and citizens are all together. However, politicians are not actually going by this. Why do you think that is?
Because ISIS is not the problem.
What is the problem?
The problem is the divisions within the country. The conflict is not about ISIS. ISIS is an element which could disappear when we dry out the resources that supporting ISIS. ISIS is not the essence of the problem. It is a distraction. The essence of the problem is who controls Syria. And once the oppositions and the regime sit together and find a way, who would control Syria and how would Syria be ruled, ISIS would finish. ISIS is not a permanent existence. ISIS will finish as soon as there is a political will to find a political solution in the country. And even in Iraq, the government in Iraq proved to be totally useless to govern Iraq. So ISIS came because of the failure of the central government to control the country. In the beginning, the Shia were saying we were the minorities and the oppressed, because the Sunni, the minority, were in power, and Saddam was a dictator, and they oppressed us. What are you doing now? You are in power. The Shia are in power, regardless of whether Maliki is a cleric or is a lay person. They are Shia. What are they doing to keep the unity of Iraq? To send positive messages to the minorities, whether Sunni, which is a huge minority in Iraq, Christians, Shabak, and Yazidis, and all kinds of minorities. What did they do? What did Maliki do before the end of his regime to bring Iraq into a unity and to assure the Sunni, for example, to assure them that they are as Iraqis as the Shia? I don't think he did enough. I heard from Shia clerics who are very unhappy how the Shia government dealt with the sectarian element in the country. They deepened the sectarian divide by provoking problems in Iraq. I think the failure of the central government to bring peace and system that suits everybody and welcome everybody to Iraq created ISIS also.
But the government, okay, did fail, but the people themselves, the Shia themselves, for example, they were all united with the Sunnis and with the other groups.
I don't think so.
No?
No. It doesn't show.
But
if you go to some Sunni areas in Iraq, they are very disillusioned with the government. And that,
the government, I would understand.
Yes, but that is reflected into their daily life. If you are oppressed by the government, and the government belongs to a certain group, you can't live with this group in peace and as if nothing is happening. No, that's not true.
But should you then blame the citizen for what the government is doing?
No, I think it's not about blaming. It is about creating mechanism for the people to live in peace. When the government itself shows signs of oppression to a group, How can you ask the people, the normal people, to be tolerant and peaceful and living together and coexistence and all that? It's not possible, because we have a pyramid, and the top of the pyramid is corrupt. And when the Shia took the rule in Iraq, they were not impressive in the way that they ruled the country. They were not much better than Saddam Hussein.
What do you think they should have done?
They should have included more the Sunni. They should have paid more attention to the Christians. They thought, well, Christians is just a group there, and who cares? I mean, they have no power. No, you can't do that. As a government, you should protect the least the least of your society and the most vulnerable of your society. The minorities in Iraq and in Syria are the most vulnerable. And because of that, once you, as a majority ruling the country, you have to show generosity to the others and include them and making them feel that Iraq is for them as much as it is for you.
How can you give this message to the government and tell them that we want a more multicultural and multi-faith country?
Through NGOs, through clerics, through the churches, through what is happening. The media plays enormous role. We need to send these messages to Syria and to Iraq and to Libya and to all the countries in the Middle East, and say, once you as a majority reach the chair and the rule of the country, it is your responsibility to make those who differ in political opinion, in religion, in sects, in any way, to feel welcome, to feel they have the right to say their opinions openly. Once we give such messages, we calm down the situation, and we start building on the cooperation. I said on the BBC Arabic, I said in a wonderful dialogue with the people who were calling from outside the studio, and I said, as a Christian in Syria, a Syrian clergy and a Syrian Christian, I have not received good messages from the oppositions. When all the names of the troops of the Syrian Free Army is Ansarul Islam, Al-Faruq, As-Sahaba, all these Islamic names, and this army was supposed to be, or is supposed to be, for all Syria. Well, when you are calling all these troops by these pure Islamic names, you are excluding me, aren't you? Oh, well, do you want to call a troop Jesus troop? No, I don't want that. I don't want any religious names in the army.
Why do you think these groups actually use religious names when Islam itself is all about peace?
It's about funding. The more,
funding?
Of course, the more rhetoric, Islamic rhetoric they get, they give, the more money they get.
But they're going against the whole ideology of Islam.
Doesn't matter. Their ideology doesn't have to match the religion itself.
But they're going by the Islamic name, though.
Yes, but they can manipulate this ideology. They can manipulate the religion to suit them. Yes, they are still Muslims, and they are still using Muslim names. but they use them the way they want. Well, tell me something. Where in the Quran or in the Hadith anybody can justify beheading one single person?
There isn't anything.
Exactly. They take a couple of words or half of a ayah, a verse, or half of a hadith, or a couple of words, and they justify beheading and killing. And where is the silent majority of the Muslims to revolt and say, not in my name?
Many people in London have gone up and said, this isn't in my name. The clerics themselves, if they were Sunni or Shia, the actual citizens in London especially, have gone up and said, ISIS and these groups are not part of us. However, the media continues to say that these are Muslim groups, Islamic groups.
What about those Muslims inside Iraq and inside Syria? I know that the element of fear is very prominent and is very strong, but still, I think and I believe strongly that Sunni Islam has not done enough to send messages to the world, not to the Christians, to the whole world, about what they think and where their position is. Even in Azhar itself, there are books and teachings which consider Christians blasphemers. Even in Al-Azhar. So, where is the Sunni world? Let me put it, although I don't believe there is a Sunni world, but in a metaphorical way, to give the messages where they stand. There is not much, and there is nothing substantial done in this way to assure the world that this is not what we believe, this is not in our name, this is not what we are for. On the contrary, the Sunni oppositions in Syria put their hands with those fanatics in order to, they thought, by allying themselves with these fanatics, they can topple the regime. And they failed. And they would fail anyway because they are stupid to think in this way.
We have run out of time. Thank you very much for
Pleasure.
joining us, Reverend Nadeem Nassar. And thank you very much for joining us on the show. See you next time.